Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy McGrath, and welcome back to Pathways to Health with Dr. George Maloney. On our show today, we're going to focus on the blue zones, those places on the face of the earth that have the longest living residents. So, what's their secret? Today, we'll look at two of those blue zones, Sardinia, Italy, and Ikaria, Greece. And let's see what we can learn from them on our Pathways to Health. Dr. Maloney, welcome back.
Happy to be here.
Good to have you here today. Anyway, Dr. Maloney, for our viewers who haven't heard of the name blue zones, can you tell them a little bit about what a blue zone is and what predicts a blue zone?
Yes, a blue zone is a geographic area that has a high percentage of long-lived people,
Okay.
age 90 to 100.
Okay. And as I mentioned in my intro, today we're going to look at just two of those blue zones because there are a few of them. How many are there, Dr. Maloney?
Well, there are five that have been identified by a researcher.
Okay. So we'll look at two of them today, and then and maybe in future shows we'll look at some others. And as I
Mhm.
mentioned, we'll take a look at Sardinia, Italy, and Ikaria, Greece. And I wanted to start with Sardinia because let me read this quote to you. Uh, Sardinia has nearly 10 times more centenarians per capita than the US. That just floors me when you consider the billions of dollars we spend on healthcare, the world renowned universities and medical schools that we have here in the States, supposedly some of the best in the world, and yet this little area of Sardinia can say that about themselves. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I think there are several areas that should be examined when you're talking about a blue zone. Physical activity is one,
Okay.
diet, purpose in life, and also social interactions. So
Okay.
any blue zone, those should be examined and see, is there something very positive in that area or is there something unique in that area?
Okay. So let's look at Sardinia for a second, okay?
Right.
Let's talk about their physical activity and their diet. Uh, what is unique about what they do? What can we learn from them?
Well, I think in regard to physical activity, Sardinia is a mountainous island, especially on the interior part.
Yeah.
And this is really where the blue zone is. And it's these people that spend a lot of time walking up and down hills, um, just through their normal aspect of their lives, just visiting people. And also a large proportion of that population is spending their time as shepherds, and they have goat herds, and they spend a lot of time moving them to fresh pasture areas. So there's a lot of natural walking without thinking about it, without awareness.
Right,
So they're getting a lot of exercise without awareness
right.
on this island. So I think that is quite positive and
Yes,
certainly differs from modern life here in the United States.
yes. Because they're not, they're not spending hundreds per month on a gym membership to get on a machine they don't even enjoy, right?
Right? They're not spending anything.
Right. And and I can just say from experience that mindless walking, just like walking your dog, is the most pleasant exercise that I can get. I
Right?
don't even think about it because I just enjoy the experience.
I don't think they have any awareness how much benefit they're getting just when they visit their neighbor's house. and walk uphill,
Yeah.
or certainly when they spend hours uh, tending to their goats.
Now, what about their diet? Can you tell us a little bit about what they eat?
So they have a plant-based Mediterranean style diet, which means they have a lot of fruits and vegetables and some small amount of seafood for protein. That's the basic Mediterranean diet. I do think Sardinia has some unique aspects to their diet, even though it's Mediterranean style. Um, I think Sardinia is known for their sourdough bread. And I also think they have a special cheese that they make, goat cheese, and that's a low-fat type of cheese, pecorino cheese. And if they save it for their own use, then it has a lot of naturally occurring beneficial bacteria. So they have those two things, and also at lunchtime they're consuming a lot of minestrone soup. Minestrone is tomato based, but also has carrots and beans and things of that nature. Whatever they have local greens in it, and I think these are both quite beneficial, part of the Mediterranean diet.
So the
Yeah.
minestrone, the minestrone soup, that is almost like a prebiotic, isn't it?
So the fact that they have these vegetables which have fiber, have significant fiber, makes that a prebiotic. And so
The
the
fiber
fiber, as we
content.
know, is anti-inflammatory. It's
Yes.
also helpful to line the digestive tract, and it has other benefits as well.
So I
So they
think
do
that's
have a prebiotic, and the cheese and the sourdough bread are both um, uh, postbiotic. What's
right.
the thing?
The cheese and the bread, they actually have active cultures in it,
They,
just like
they
yogurt has
have active
active
cultures,
cultures. Right.
right?
Right. And then just to stress again what you mentioned about the minestrone as a prebiotic, it's the fiber content that is so important. And I want our viewers to know that.
Right. It's the
Because,
fact that it has vegetables. The vegetables all have varying amounts of fiber, but it's the fiber that's significant
right. And it's
in the prebiotic manner.
because we're looking for the anti-inflammatory properties, right, Dr. Maloney?
Right.
Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. You also mentioned a little bit about their daily lifestyle, um, their social interaction. What does that have to do with their longevity?
Um, well, I think this is considered very positive also, to have social interaction and not be isolated. And
Right?
I think this is something that's quite common in Sardinia, um, for them to get together with local people.
Yes.
So I think that benefit is present in Sardinia to a large degree.
And they also, like a lot of cultures um, outside the US, they really value their elders, right? Elders and close family ties. That's a very important aspect of their culture, correct?
Yes, and those are the people that they're likely to be getting together with uh, very frequently,
Right,
often one time per day.
right. So the elderly may not have the problem of isolation that a lot of the elderly find themselves in our country.
Right. I think they're likely to be involved with their friends and relatives on a daily basis.
Right. Um, and then I think you mentioned they have some similarities with the Mediterranean diet. Um, I've read that they, a big part of their daily life is a daily gathering with friends and a little sip of red wine every afternoon. Is that the case?
Yes, I think when they do get together, they do have a small meal or a snack, and sometimes it's accompanied by this red wine that's relatively low alcohol.
Yes, and in fact, I've read that their wine, which is similar to Grenache, but it's a local wine. I think it's called Cannonau or something like that. It's it's very high in flavonoids, right? Which is really what we look to red wine for, correct?
I think it's really the fact that it's a social interaction, and they're having uh, small amounts of red wine with food. I think that can be very positive.
And that's another thing we want to stress for our viewers. We're not talking about like 2 bottles of wine alone at home. We're talking about little sips of red wine on hanging out with friends in the afternoon, neighbors, just enjoying each other's company and de-stressing for a little while if they have stress in their society, right?
Right, absolutely.
Um, so let's also move on. I don't want to take up all our time. Um, let's move on to Ikaria, Greece, um, because that is another one of the blue zones. And again, I came across a statistic that really surprised me. In Ikaria, Greece, 1 in 3 residents in Ikaria lives into their 90s. Again, that is astounding. And the society is nearly free of dementia. So let's talk about some of those same aspects of Ikaria, Dr. Maloney, and what some of your thoughts are about the longevity in Ikaria.
Right. So again, it's a moderate climate. A lot of them have their own gardens, and they start their day with physical activity, doing gardening and tending to some of the vegetables they may have in their garden. So again, we have a lot of movement, small movement, not really vigorous movement necessarily, and certainly not doing any heavy lifting, but light exercise. And then a lot of them have businesses in town. So they will then walk into town and open up their business and be occupied that way. So they are starting the day with physical activity.
Now, another very interesting piece of information I came across about Ikaria is that among these long living people, the longest living in Ikaria happen to live in the highlands. So, doesn't that even more support the idea that walking, perhaps walking at an incline in hilly areas, that in itself has health benefits. The use of the muscles, the cardiovascular system, what requires to climb these hilly areas every day.
Yes, and so even if they're simply visiting their neighbor or going to church, when they leave the house after they've already had some physical activity without any awareness that they're doing that, they then get physical activity walking uphill just to visit their neighbor or just to go to church once a week.
Right, right. So they don't have to turn the treadmill to an incline, right? They just do it naturally.
I don't think any of them have heard of a treadmill.
Right.
I don't think anybody in town or in the village possesses a treadmill.
So, Dr. Maloney, what about the Icarian diet? What can you tell us about that?
So again, this is a plant-based Mediterranean diet, but they do have some unique aspects to their diet also. Um, a lot of them drink herbal tea, and this is made with local herbs and local greens. And that's very common to have that at mealtime or to have that in between meals as a kind of a tea time. That's very common. They also have their own type of low-fat cheese. A lot of them consume feta cheese, which
Okay.
again has its own naturally good bacteria and is a probiotic that way.
Yes. Again, the
They also
culture,
have a
right?
local honey that when kept for its own consumption, local consumption, is not heated, it's not boiled, it's not pasteurized. So that again maintains a lot of local products that can be health promoted as
Right.
well.
So what I'm hearing from you about both areas in regard to diet is there's not a lot of processing, right? There's a lot of there's a lot of use of fresh fresh foods, fresh vegetable, like hands-on hands-on production of their food product.
Yes, a lot of local production, a lot of handmade uh, making of products and consuming local products so that a lot of preservatives are not having to be added and a lot of treatments which make food last longer and can be shipped elsewhere, but you may be losing some benefit,
Okay.
especially if we're speaking in terms of probiotic, which means fermented food with good bacteria, health promoting bacteria.
Right.
And they may be getting that in feta cheese, probably has lactobacillus or some other health promoting bacteria.
Right.
And the honey, because again, it's not pasteurized, also may have some local product that's health promoting. And just the fact that it's local and consumed without additives makes it probably a healthier honey than we tend to get.
Right.
That's been sitting on the shelf in the grocery store.
And so that's a comparison worth mentioning, right, Dr. Maloney, that compare this now to the ultra processing that we have become accustomed to in the United States and that we consume so often.
Yes, and as we have talked about previously, you want to avoid ultra processed foods.
Right.
You want foods that are minimally processed. Local foods are probably always best.
Okay. Um, and then another thing about their society that I wanted to ask you about, and it's true of Sardinia too. They drink a lot of goat's milk.
Goat's milk and the cheese they're consuming is goat's cheese. So
So yeah,
the positive aspect of that is considered to be the fact that it's low fat.
right.
And when we're talking about cheese, um, it has health promoting bacteria present.
So that we're seeing some themes here, right? Natural food, low fat, um, uh, live active cultures in some of their
Yes,
food.
I think the themes are the themes we've talked about before. Prebiotic foods have a lot of fiber. Uh, Probiotic foods have naturally occurring bacteria. These are both health promoting.
Okay. So let's just get into a little bit about the lifestyle of the Icarians as well, and their purpose and their daily activities. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, as I said, a lot of them start the day gardening, and then they have businesses, so they have purpose that way. They go into town, they work in their business, then they usually take a break for a meal where they get together with again friends and relatives, and then they go back to work. So a lot of them have a lot of social interaction that way. They also are Greek Orthodox and they have interaction with their church. And again, if they leave their house to walk to church, they're probably walking uphill or downhill and getting some significant exercise that way. And I think a lot of them find a purpose in their
They also
work
take an
ethic.
afternoon nap, don't they?
They take an afternoon nap, which is also considered to be good for your blood pressure. It's hard to have your blood pressure be up all day if in the middle of the day, you've spent a few hours taking it down.
Back when I worked in an office, I always would have loved to have like a 3 o'clock nap. I never got it, but I always thought that would have been beneficial. The other thing about the Greek Orthodox is that because of their holidays, rather frequent holidays, their the people who practice their faith seem to have their own form of intermittent fasting, right?
Yes, they fast during the holidays and they don't call it that again. It's not something they have awareness of, but their type of fasting corresponds to what we're talking about here in the US, practicing intermittent fasting as a way to promote a healthy diet and for weight loss uh, and things of that nature.
Which is something we've just recently caught on to. The whole idea of intermittent fasting is sort
Right.
of a newer concept in the States, but these people have been doing this naturally for years upon years,
That's right. And,
right?
and as I say, they have no awareness that they're doing that, but they may be getting certain weight control benefits from that.
And I think you already mentioned this, but um, you know, frequent parties and dancing is a big part of their lifestyle too, right? So there's another natural exercise. This group loves to dance.
Yes, well, this is their main activity when they have parties. They have kind of a group dancing,
Yes.
and this is kind of common among other Greek islands also. This was a tradition. So and they do this for hours at a time with groups of all ages. And so I think this is what it turns out to be exercise without awareness.
There you go.
When you're dancing for 4 or 5 hours at a party, you don't realize the benefit that you've probably given yourself.
And they're not just sitting around drinking, folks. They're having a little wine and then they're dancing.
Right.
So anyway, Dr. Maloney, we're running out of time. We have to wrap it up. So as usual, can you please give our viewers 3 pathways to health based on the lifestyles of the Icarians and the Sardinians in the blue zones?
So, yes, I think the first one is physical activity without awareness. And they both practice this. We were just talking about dancing, but also just walking uphill to visit friends. And also when you're out um, with your goats and you're moving them from pasture to pasture, you're getting a lot of physical exercise, a lot of light walking. But sometimes when you're going up and down hills, it's not so light walking.
Right.
So I would say physical activity without awareness would be number one. Something we could learn from them. Also, secondary to that would be diet. It's a Mediterranean style diet, as we've talked about before, which is a lot of vegetables and small amounts of seafood for additional protein. But the vegetables have fiber, and so this is a prebiotic, and the fiber is anti-inflammatory in nature, has lots of anti-inflammatory benefits. And as we know, a lot of disease processes occur because of inflammation.
Right.
And also probiotic, we have local sourdough bread in some cases and local cheese in other cases, feta cheese. And these two things have naturally occurring bacteria, health promoting bacteria.
Okay.
And so uh, they're very similar to fermented foods and they're a probiotic in there.
Okay.
And the last thing I think uh, is purpose. And I think if you have a religion and have a lot of church activities, you have purpose that way. If you have a business, as we mentioned, this is common. If you have a business, that gives you purpose every day. But it can also be simply interacting with your friends and relatives and the elderly people simply have an interest in their grandchildren or their nieces and nephews, and that gives them a purpose every day.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be anything particularly complex, but I think there are many things that create purpose for people as long as they're out and interacting. And I think that's also a key thing. But I would say those three things.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Maloney. And there you have it, folks. There are some uh, several ways that he has given you that you can easily incorporate this into your own lives. And we will continue in our upcoming shows to talk about other blue zones, to see what else we can learn from these societies in order to improve our own health. So thank you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye now.